So, Zen 3 is out. You guys already know how amazing AMD's Ryzen 5000 series of CPUs are. In fact, if you're interested in our full performance review, you can check it out right over here. You see, as I was testing these CPUs, I was really impressed by the performance, and that really inspired me to build an editing workstation PC for myself to leverage all that power now that I've switched to DaVinci Resolve full time. And the higher sustained clock speeds that we've noticed should definitely come in clutch for my intense editing workflow. And let's be honest, it's also a fantastic gaming CPU, definitely beating Intel's high-end lineup, which is just amazing. But I also didn't want it to be a fully blown out ATX tower. I really like small form factor PCs, and I'm taking that path once again. In fact, the case that's sitting right behind me is 10 liters in size, and it can support a full-size ATX motherboard and a dual slot graphics card. That's right, a full-size ATX motherboard inside a small form factor case. So let's get to the parts list. I hope you guys are excited just like I am. In fact, I want to thank Gigabyte for supporting this build. So let's get to it right after this.
You know, 2020 has been tough. Let's not make our components suffer. Let them breathe, let them relax. With the Eclipse Aries series by Phanteks, your hardware will appreciate the size options and you the experience. Available for every build at different scales and price points too. They all share the ultra-fine mesh front panels engineered specifically for best airflow with perforations of 1mm that also act as a dust filter. Check out the P300A, P360A, P400A, and P500A down below. The perfect Eclipse for 2020.
All right, so I wanted to get to the case initially because you guys might be wondering, what am I even talking about? A full-size ATX motherboard inside a 10-liter chassis? Come on, Eber, prove it. Well, here it is, my friends. Meet the SFF Time p-atx V2. And right off the bat, you can tell the team behind this project were focusing on four main factors: compactness, compatibility with most of the components available in the market right now, unrestricted airflow, and simplicity. For compatibility, this thing is really interesting. You can have either a triple slot GPU with an ITX motherboard, a 370mm long double slot GPU with an ATX board or an MATX board, or a shorter 245mm GPU like the RTX 3070 Founders Edition with an ATX motherboard and a 120mm AIO cooler. And to top it all off, you can actually order one of these right now. So we'll make sure to leave a link down below in case you're interested. Now for the processor, we decided to go with the Ryzen 9 5900X. This is the second fastest Zen 3 CPU that AMD has launched recently for the AM4 platform, featuring 12 cores and 24 threads, and clock speeds that can boost up to 4.8 GHz. Now, given that the CPU has a TDP of 105 watts, finding the right cooler was a bit of a challenge. Now, we could have gone with the Noctua L9A Chromax like we did with the 3090 ITX build, but remember, we ran that system in eco mode to keep temperatures under control, so we didn't want to go that route. In fact, we decided to keep looking and looking and looking, and we found this beautiful gem of an air cooler. This is the Thermalright AXP100 full copper-based downdraft air cooler. Just unboxing this thing and holding it for the first time made me feel like I was holding a piece of jewelry. It weighs about 600 grams, which might not sound like a lot on paper, but for a low-profile cooler, you'll notice it instantly, and it's built like a tank. The design consists of 6 copper nickel-plated heat pipes, which is directly soldered onto the copper base plate for the best heat dissipation, and it can support CPUs with a TDP of up to 180 watts. Now, you might be wondering why we went with this particular air cooler, and the simple answer to that is the p-atx case can only support a maximum cooler height clearance of 59mm, and after testing a bunch of air coolers, this was the only cooler that was able to fit that criteria that can also adequately cool the 5900X with that 105 watt TDP spec. Housing the 5900X is Gigabyte's B550 Vision D. At first glance, this is the most beautiful looking motherboard I've ever seen, with a very clean aesthetic throughout the PCB. But make no mistake, this is purely targeted towards creators, and reliability has been their top priority with this board. So that means you can populate this with ECC memory up to 128 gigabytes. It's also QLV tested with NVIDIA's Quadro GPUs, which is an option we'll be exploring in another video. There's 2 PCIe 4.0 slots for plenty of expansion, and the best part is the I/O. I mean, just look at it. It's a content creator's dream with a plethora of USB 3.1 ports, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports that can also be used to daisy chain up to 12 external devices, including displays. Now, Thunderbolt is super rare to find on AMD boards these days, so this is a welcoming addition. Also, you can redirect the display port from your graphics card to the motherboard and then use the Thunderbolt port to connect it to a display. And if you have built-in I/O on that external device like a display, it's simply a plug-and-play solution and everything would just work right away, which is awesome. The other cool feature is that it supports dual gigabit LAN ports that support high bandwidth and low latency. However, I did wish if it came with a 10G port, but that's something that an expansion card can address, so that's that. Plus, it also features Wi-Fi 6, so there's that. For memory, Gigabyte has once again hooked us up with their Designaire 64GB kit with a memory speed of 3200 MHz. For one, the simple aluminum white heatsink matches the Vision D motherboard really well, and with 64GB, this will be a huge upgrade for my intense editing sessions. Now for storage, I went with the Aorus 2TB NVMe Gen 4 SSD. This thing is insanely fast. I mean, the read-write performance is just crazy high, given that it's a Gen 4 drive, and they've included a copper heatsink spreader, but we wouldn't be needing that since the Vision D has that built in. Now for the graphics card, this was pretty much an easy call. We're going with the RTX 3080 Founders Edition. It's a dual slot card, which is compatible with the case, including an ATX motherboard, and the airflow orientation works out perfectly with the case. So the intake fan at the front exhausts hot air at the back, and then on the other side, the fan exhausts hot air through the peripherals on the case's side panel. We'll test out temperatures once we've completed the build, but this just allows us to pop in a really powerful graphics card without worrying about case temperatures, or really high case temperatures. Powering the whole system is Corsair's SF750W small form factor PSU. This should be plenty enough to power the 5900X and the RTX 3080 FE while also maintaining lower noise, and it's fully modular. Plus, Corsair includes premium individually sleeved cables, which should make cable management a breeze. So now that I've taken you through a complete rundown of the parts list, let's put this thing together. All right, so the build is complete, and as usual, I left it here at Mike's place.
I had some fun playing around with this one.
Yeah, whenever you leave something here, something changes the next day. It's just a fact that I have to deal with it. But honestly, I really enjoyed my time building inside this case. I want to say it's probably one of the easiest small form factor builds that I've ever done in a really long time. So, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, you see, you left it here, and I did a couple things. I tried different things with cable management, because in an ITX system like this, cable management and getting those cables out of the airflow path is like one of the most important things that you can do, especially when it comes to an air-cooled system like this. Mm-hmm. My only issue when it came to actually working in this is the RTX 3080 and where the power connector comes out of, because here it basically makes a complete beeline out from the card, and yes, you can route it upwards, or you can route it sort of like in here, but there it gets even messier when it comes into contact with other motherboard components.
I think that with the minimum amount of cables that we have, especially with the SFX power supply that's fully modular, so I only needed to bring in the 24-pin motherboard cable, the CPU connector, and then the GPU. No SATA cables, no Molex connectors, no extra unwanted things that I needed. So overall, like I said, it was so fast. I mean, I was done and I was like, wait, is it actually done? I mean, is this all of it?
Can you talk about this in relation to your experience building something like the Sentry? Because the Sentry is actually what I'm using as my daily system right now.
So from a, okay, I'll give it a grade scale, right? So building the Sentry, I think I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10, right? I think it's a beautiful case. It's good. It looks great. But the fact that you had to deal with cable management, I think that was the biggest challenges with that PC. This, 9 out of 10. Like, that's how good it is because, sure, it's a little bit bigger, 10 liters versus 7.5 liters, but
visually, this actually looks a little bit smaller in my opinion because it's white. It blends into more environments.
Yeah.
Then again, that Sentry right now, and I'm still working on modding a couple things in there. I'm really jealous about this because it almost has the perfect sort of passive airflow, whereas I'm going to introduce a little bit more airflow into the Sentry. But I think one of your main problems building in that Sentry wasn't, I don't know if it's the case, maybe I'm defending it so much because it's on my desk right now, but maybe it was due to the power supply and how rigid those cables are. And I know a lot of you guys said, look, maybe look into modifying the cables a little bit so they're less rigid. So maybe it was because of that?
Probably, but I don't have to worry about it in this build. Not a problem at all. So I'm pretty happy with it, guys.
So I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about the 5900X because it is a brand new processor on an existing platform. And we are working right now with beta BIOSes. Actually, as you're seeing, this is probably the public BIOS, and there's probably going to be a couple revisions between now and then. So the Vision D is an amazing motherboard, and the BIOS in there is something unique. It's white. It looks like the motherboard itself. But right now it does, at least with the core performance boost on, it does tend to overvolt the processor just a little bit more than this cooler could handle. So I needed to go in there and modify a couple of the C states. We are not using eco mode. We're not cheating this time. Thank you, Optimum Tech. It's running between 4.5 and 4.7 on an all-core load under 70 degrees right now. And that is with only the one fan running. But it's doing that with a cooler that Eber had some problems with.
Yeah, let's talk about that cooler. Okay, here's my thing, right? I love the heatsink. The full copper plated, I mean, when you hold this thing, it feels like you're holding a jewelry, like I mentioned earlier. But it's that fan. I don't feel like fully switching to this PC as my workstation because of that fan.
But you don't see it.
I know, but you can still see accents of it. So if I can find a fan that can fit within that,
it's 59 millimeters, I think, total cooler height, 57 or 59, and then but the fan itself has to be just 14 millimeters.
Exactly.
And as far as I can find, and you've looked too, it's this fan or a standard Noctua, and I don't think you're going to gain anything by going to a Noctua.
I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to have to keep looking, and if you guys have any suggestions, let us know in the comments because I do not like that fan. But hey, it serves a purpose, so I guess I'll give it a pass. But for me,
it's function over form because this cooler is technically rated at 180 watts. I can challenge that a little bit because when I was using this thing with core performance boost on the motherboard enabled, we were seeing 80 degrees, 90 degrees, and supposedly this is only a 105 watt processor.
Yeah.
So, and then the fan was operating at like 100%.
Yeah.
And this thing is loud when it's operating at 100%.
Yeah, it's at 2400 RPM, right?
Exactly. And that's another thing I wanted to mention is that right now we're achieving that under 70 degrees Celsius at 4.5 to 4.7 at under 40 decibels.
Which is really good.
It's really good considering that this case is open. There's no tempered glass, there's no baffles, there's no nothing.
Oh, and it doesn't have any air filters. So basically, it's unrestricted airflow. Definitely leads to a lot of maintenance for sure in the long term. But hey, I'll take better temperatures over that. So.
And I know what you guys are going to be asking now too is what about the GPU temperatures? And that's something that I wanted to play around with again. So the p-atx case allows you to mount a single 120 millimeter fan right around this area behind the GPU. And I thought to myself, okay, yep, that's going to aid in the exhaust of the hot air from the RTX 3080. It actually didn't. What ended up happening is the GPU remained at the same 64 degrees that we see it operating in an open test bench, which is amazing, and it achieved the exact same clock speeds that we saw in an open test bench. When we introduced that fan, nothing changed. What did change is the noise profile.
Right.
The system actually got noisier under load. I can hypothesize as to why that is, and I think it's because the GPU fan is exhausting air at a different flow rate than the exhaust fan can actually exhaust it, and that causes turbulence between the two fans. So I actually think that you can run this system, at least with the RTX 3080, without an exhaust fan there. And nothing changed in terms of temperatures.
Which is great.
I am, like I said, really jealous about Eber for this. This is probably going to be his editing station going forward. You know, his love for small form factors cases, and now it's sort of starting to become my love. So anyways, Eber, what are your sort of closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts is that now I have a more powerful system than you do, except for the graphics card.
No, I've got the 3090 in there, buddy.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, that's what I said. I have a 3080, you have a 3090. I've got a 5900X, you've got a 3950X. So, yeah.
On eco mode right now.
On eco mode. Eco mode. So
until I make those mods.
Yeah. So let us know what you guys think about this build. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm more excited to build even more small form factor PCs. So if you guys have any other suggestions in terms of checking out other cases, we'd be more than happy to do that. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
See you guys.